Hello, my name is LaPorcha Carter. I'm the Senior Manager for Chronic Disease Prevention at Harris County Public Health, and I also serve on the core team of Cities Changing Diabetes Houston. Our Cities Changing Diabetes Houston team is here to provide caregivers with the information and resources for the support they need as they care for people living with diabetes. That's right, today we're caring for our caregivers. Today's episode is coming up right now. You don't want to miss this. This weekly broadcast is developed and produced by Cities Changing Diabetes volunteers in Houston and Philadelphia. Our two cities are the U.S. members of a global network of 36 cities working to improve diabetes prevention, care, and management around the world. You can learn more about Cities Changing Diabetes by going to citieschangingdiabetes.com. The purpose of MyDiabetesHQ Live is to help people with diabetes and their support teams. Today, I am joined by Connie Assiff, Senior Health Outreach Coordinator at Harris County Public Health. She is also a former caregiver. And we also have CCD Core Team members, Serena Valentine, CEO of Core Initiatives, and Reva, CEO of Reneka App Builders. Hey guys, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see your shining faces on a Saturday.
Good morning.
Okay. So today we're going to start by talking about caregiving. And so hopkinsmedicine.org defines a caregiver as a person who tends to the needs or concerns of a person with short or long-term limitations due to illness, injury, or disability. Family caregivers play a significant role in healthcare as they are often the main source of valuable information about the person they are providing for, right? So to our audience today, we'd like to know, are you a caregiver? If so, share it in the chat with us and continue to be engaged through the conversation today. So Connie, I'd like to start with you. Can you share a little bit about your experience with providing care to a loved one living with diabetes?
Yes, LaPorcha, thank you for having me here. And it's just wonderful to be able to talk about this topic. A lot of people don't even realize that they are caregivers. They're just daughters like me that was taking care of their father. And it was very rewarding, although it had its challenges. Before I started really taking care of him, providing any type of care, I myself had no idea what the numbers were, checking blood sugars. Right. And so that was another challenge for me to learn how I can better encourage him to keep his numbers, to keep his logs, and to eat the right foods, but still enjoy everyday life. And also balancing that father-daughter relationship. I didn't want him to feel like he was relinquishing any control. And I wanted to honor him as my father.
Thank you, Connie. No, I love what you said. A lot of people don't realize that they are caregivers. And so that's why we wanted to start with that definition, right? Like it can be anyone providing care for a family member, whether it's short-term or long-term, you're considered a caregiver. So you hit the nail on the head with sharing that. Serena or Reva, would either of you like to contribute to that or share any experiences about giving or receiving care?
Yeah, I'll go. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 11 years old. So I'm coming up on 17 years. And, you know, when you are 11, you are transitioning out of elementary school into middle school. There's a lot of changes going on. And then to be diagnosed at that age is an extremely overwhelming experience. So as you can imagine, not only for me was it overwhelming, but I think for my parents, it was extremely overwhelming because they had never even heard of diabetes. Like the first thing my mom and dad will tell you is when they heard the word diabetes, they heard like, is it like a blood thing? Like, are you gonna die? What, like, there was no education around it at that point. And so as we went through the process of being trained on diabetes management with nutrition, with insulin, with injections. It was a team effort. And as I got into my adolescent years, specifically middle school, I went through a rebellious stage where I was angry that I had diabetes and that I was being treated differently. And I almost felt like I was being micromanaged and under a microscope by my parents. And that was a really tough place to be, because I can only imagine now, looking back on it, that my parents were only trying to do the best they could and, help me and protect me. And but having someone like me was probably extremely difficult, because I gave pushback at every step of the way. So that caregiving experience is a very fine line. It goes back to what Connie said. She wanted to respect that relationship, that father-daughter relationship. Same thing with my parents. They wanted to give me the experience of being able to grow up and evolve, but they also were worried that I wasn't going to be responsible for my health. I think in college, towards the latter end of college, is when that transition started to happen, where they kind of relinquished that helicopter mode, and I was able to prove, almost in a way, that I was self-reliant and that I would come to them when I would need help. That took time and trust building, and a lot of therapists were involved in the course of my journey, but it came down to, I had to have acceptance, and I also had to have trust in going to my caregivers when I needed help. And also on them, they had to know that fine line of not being so overbearing in every little thing. What's your blood sugar? What's your blood sugar? Have you checked your blood sugar? So it's just a balance between receiving care and being on the other end of it, and having a mutual respect factor for each other.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that, Reva. You share an interesting perspective from the person receiving care. But you and Connie touch on such similarities, right, about building that trust between the caregiver and the person receiving care. Whether you're family or not, you still have to build that trust and find that balance. And so you guys really touched on some good points with that. That was really great. Serena, anything from you on that?
Well, no, I know I've been given care to. I've been on the receiving end of care a couple of times in my life due to diabetes complications, and it's hard. It's hard for the caregiver, and it's hard for the person receiving care. The caregiver now has an extra responsibility, and the person receiving care doesn't like to feel helpless and feel like they can't do anything. So, it's emotional and mental on both ends. I would say, because I've been on both ends, so I know what it's like to give care and what it's like to receive care. And so, because I know that, it kind of helps me put in perspective. Well, let me not be so hard on this person giving me care, because they are taking on an extra responsibility. And then me being a caregiver, it's like, let me have a little compassion, because this person, it isn't like they want to be helpless, or they want you to care for them because they don't want to do anything, or because they're lazy. It's not even because of that. It's because they need the care. So, it's just looking at both ends of the spectrum, and you have to take both sides into consideration.
Right. No, and you that was a perfect transition. I don't know if you did that on purpose for helping us out, but that's like a perfect segue to the next question, Serena. And that's that caregiving can be stressful, right? And so it's challenging at times. And it's important for caregivers to maintain their own health while caring for the health of someone else. And so what do you all think that caregivers need in terms of support?
So I think caregivers need peer support. They need their own circle that they can go to and confide in, and kind of share tips and tricks and solutions that are working for them that maybe they could implement in order to, like I said, build that trust with the person they're caring for.
Mhm.
And then also, there's nothing there's nothing wrong in receiving help from a mental health capacity. It is
Mhm.
emotionally taxing to continuously take care of someone and to feel like you want to shake them and be like, do this, it's good for you. And it doesn't happen because that person is not in that headspace to
Right.
receive that, So it's just there needs to be more support for caregivers, whether they go to peer support groups or have their own type of mental health sanctuary.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Mental health and taking care
Yeah.
of your mental health is very important. Absolutely.
I love what Verma was saying about the mental health
Mhm.
aspect. Depression also runs in my family, and my dad had depression along with the type 2 diabetes, and that affected both of us.
Yeah.
It was difficult for me to provide the care and encourage him, and then at the same time, he would, just like when we had to take the keys away from him because he had developed peripheral neuropathy and he
Mhm.
could not, should not drive, couldn't feel the brake or the gas. That's losing independence for any of
Mhm.
us is very difficult. And so, without a support group, without people that can understand and
Mhm.
not be judgmental, but actually give us, just like Verma was saying, the tips and tricks that would guide us and help us, and it's just very stressful. So the person receiving the care and the caregiver both need that outlet. They need that someone to talk to, someone to understand, and most importantly, to let them know they're not alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I love what you guys are saying about that with taking care of your mental health as a caregiver, right? But I had never considered, thinking about the person that you're giving care for is they're losing their independence as well, and thinking about how that's taking effect on them. And then you're caring for them and seeing those challenges, and it becomes a challenge for you. So I love what you guys said about, really finding that peer group or that group of folks that, can provide support for you during that time because they actually understand also what you're going through. Um, and so, what are some of the solutions to these challenges? We mentioned like the challenges of, watching your loved one lose their independence and, the struggles of mental health. What are some of those solutions? I know Reva mentioned therapy earlier. You guys have talked about peer support. What are some of those other solutions for the challenges that caregivers face, in your opinion?
I would say to operate in some self care. You do have to take time to yourself, and sometimes it's hard, it's difficult, especially when you have a busy schedule and
Right.
you have the busy schedule and the person you're caring for has the busy schedule. So,
Mhm.
but it's important to even take those few minutes. I always tell people
Mhm.
take a few minutes to breathe.
Yeah.
And some people think that's so simple. Oh, I breathe all day long. No, breathe.
Mhm.
Take a pause just to think, breathe in, breathe out, because you have no idea how powerful one huge deep inhale and exhale does for you. And especially in a moment of high stress,
Mhm.
So um, self care in the matter of taking a moment to breathe, self
Mhm.
care, and also making sure that your needs are met as well.
Mhm.
Especially when you're dealing with diabetes and I won't go too far into it, but if you're a person with diabetes giving care, you still have to make sure your blood sugar is taken, your
Absolutely.
medications are taken, because
Mhm.
you can't
Mhm.
properly care for anyone else if you're not well enough to care for them.
Mhm.
It's so self care is very important
Yes.
for that.
Yeah.
There are classes that were very helpful for me. One of them was a powerful tools for caregivers.
Mhm.
That's not just for diabetes, but in general, any disease management class that is helping someone develop those tools, just like breathing, knowing like when to give someone space. And also, just like we always say, we have to care for ourselves, and in the plane, put the mask on yourself before we give the mask to someone else. We cannot pour from an empty cup. And some of those ideas, and even learning about trying to manage a disease, we have to learn about the disease, just like I had to myself. I had no idea what the numbers meant. My dad did not have to have insulin until the very end, but it's ever changing. And so we have to stay on top of learning those tools.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So I'm glad you mentioned powerful tools for caregivers. Connie said that she's actually taking those classes herself, and we have the resource here. So for more information about powerful tools, this is the website, powerfultoolsforcaregivers.org. And so these classes help caregivers take better care of themselves while caring for a relative or a friend. So if any of you guys are interested in powerful tools, the website is powerfultoolsforcaregiving.org. And both of you guys mentioned really, really good things. You mentioned mental health, but then also taking care of your physical health. That's important too, right? So we always think about self-care as in the mental health space and making sure we're breathing and inhaling, exhaling, which is awesome. But you mentioned it right there, Serena. It was like, you got to remember your physical health too, right? Because you might be taking care of someone else's physical health, but yours is still important. And Connie mentioned that, pouring from an empty cup. What about you, Reva? Any other solutions that you could offer for caregivers?
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback off of Serena with the physical health. Our bodies hold on to a lot of stress. So if we can physically exert that stress by going for a walk, by working out, we bring those levels down, and we're automatically more logical and more compassionate and understanding, because in that moment we get really heated or feel attacked or just want to get defensive. So I'm a big advocate for just get out there and just like take a break. Be like, you know what? Right now, this doesn't work for my mental space right now. I need a few minutes to decompress and get my thoughts together. I'll come back and talk to you once I'm in that space. And being able to like disengage, go for a walk, go work out, and then come back to a conversation about how we can move forward is a lot healthier.
For sure. Thank you guys. The conversation is so great. And I actually want to share a quote from former First Lady Rosalind Carter. And she says, there are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. Caregiving is universal. And so just hearing like the different perspectives in the conversation so far, it just really drives that point home, right? We'll all, be related to caregiving in some way at some point in our lives because it's universal. So I kind of want to move on to talk about a little bit more, digging deeper into resources and peer support, specifically wink, wink at you, Serena. So, for people living with prediabetes and diabetes, we have resources like Diabetes Prevention Program and Diabetes Self-Management. So we know that there are some similar resources for caregivers. Connie mentioned powerful tools, right? And so what are some of those other resources? And specifically, I want to talk about peer support. We kind of mentioned it earlier, but what does that look like for caregivers?
Peer support generally is like it's a whole thing where they come, it's people come together with a common issue, right? So we can if you go to on Facebook, type in the search engine Houston Diabetes Peer Support Program. We help caregivers as well. Okay, so it's people who are caring for people with diabetes, because it's important for them to even get the education about the illness so that they can help their loved ones or the people that they serve. So yeah, so that's my plug about our peer support group. But I'm sure there are others. Just check out your community. Um, you can even check out some. You can call. I think it's like 3311. They have different community resources for different kinds of peer support programs, because not all caregivers help people with diabetes. They help people with other illnesses as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that about peer support. So it sounds like there's a peer support group out there for everyone, honestly, whether you're a caregiver or not, or you have diabetes or not, right? You can find that support somewhere in the community. So thank you, Serena, for sharing that. Anyone else have any resources they want to share for caregivers?
The American Diabetes
Diabetes
Association. Oh.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Reva. I'll just say that the powerful, besides the powerful tools for caregivers, but even the diabetes self-management classes, they're very helpful. Even different types of tools. And I just want to mention something that's very basic. We all think we know how to communicate, but sometimes we don't. We're not good listeners. We have to be taught that. And so that is very important in any type of disease management, listening to the person that actually is going through it, trying to empathize, have compassion for them, but listening to what their concerns are. My dad had some issues with a toe having to be amputated and things like that. And so it's really important to be able to effectively communicate. We think we all know how to do that very easily, but something as simple as that is something you can learn in these type of classes.
Yeah. That's awesome, Connie, because a lot of people think, with the self-management classes, they're specific for folks with diabetes, and they are, but there are tools that you can pull out of that as a caregiver. And Connie and I, have taught classes together before, and we'll have folks in there that are there for their daughter, or, they won't have diabetes themselves, but they're learning how to, care for their daughter. I'm thinking specifically of one mother-daughter duo, but, caring for their daughter. And we've also had couples, husbands and wives, take the class together as well, so that they can learn the tools that they need to help care for the person living with diabetes. And so that's a really good point, Connie. I didn't even think about that, but caregivers can also join on these classes, that are meant for the people living with diabetes. That's awesome.
And it's good for everyone, because they're reading labels together and seeing how much sugar is in something. And our eyes are like popping out of our heads saying, what? It says no sugar. And it's like no added sugars. I mean, it's something that we don't want. We want to provide the best care, but if we don't know how to cook the right food or buy the right, items at the grocery store, then we want to be part of the solution. So it's the same thing.
Absolutely. And then everyone gets healthier in that sense.
No, I was just gonna say, also, y'all, I've had before pandemic, when we were doing in-person peer support, I've had husbands come in with their wives, and they're like, I'm here because my wife made me come. But it's that support that is so key, and it's important. Even with peer support, we may not be teaching a class, but we do talk about certain issues, and helping people emotionally try to deal with what they're dealing with diabetes, which that also the spouse is also, it's almost like that person has diabetes too, because they have to make sure, they have to ask you, did you take your blood sugar, did you take your medicine? And so it's just so funny. I had one husband in particular come in. At first his wife had to bring him because he would not come otherwise, but after that he just started coming by himself, because it started making him feel better. And sometimes his wife would come in, sometimes she wouldn't, but she was saying she was trying to give him space, and just seeing that whole transition from being someone who really doesn't want to talk to anyone about it, to being someone who's happy to share because it's helping them, so that a caregiver being along the way with that person, with the person that they love, is very life-changing. It's very impactful.
Yes. You know what I love about the conversation? We're talking about the caregiver and the person receiving care, like working together on that care plan. Like, right, like it's a partnership, going to the classes together and going to peer support together, and learning together and working together. I just love that has become the theme, right? Like the caregiver and the person receiving care truly working together. Reva, I know you had something to mention earlier.
Yeah, I was gonna say for my family in particular, the American Diabetes Association played a big part in offering peer support. When I was diagnosed, my dad jumped straight in and got involved on the local board level, and then, you know, as recently as last year was on the national board as chairman, and he was able to build like his peer support group and really like understand from a bunch of different perspectives, like clinicians, researchers, patients, caregivers, what the pain points were, and they were able to really connect on that. And my dad will tell you, you know, that's how he's felt like he's been able to make the most impact in helping people with diabetes.
For sure. I love
Same
that.
thing-
Diabetes
same thing.
Association has a lot of great information, and it's also an opportunity for us to get into advocacy and, you know, advocating for folks with diabetes. So thank you for sharing that. And so perfectly, that's a perfect segue. I promise I'm not paying these guys. It's just a really good conversation, you know, but the next question is, what can caregivers do to advocate for themselves? And so we talk about them advocating, you know, for the folks that they are working with, but how can they, you know, advocate for themselves and truly use advocacy as an outlet? I think that was just Reva, the perfect transition.
Well, I can give you some personal examples. So, my dad and I were like the dynamic duo. We'll go up to Washington, D.C., and we'll advocate on the Hill. And my dad is very personable in talking about the struggles that we had growing up, you know, to our congressmen, because they need to know about the impact this has on not only like the patient, but the caregiver as well, and the support system. It takes a whole team to get someone through a chronic disease. It's not a one-person job at all.
Sure.
So, you know, being able to communicate that we need better support for mental health, that we need better types of technology and access to technology, and easier access to the transparency in the supply chain of insulin so that we can actually afford our insulin.
Right.
Is like it's an all-inclusive, you know, we need someone to advocate, and caregivers need to be there because they see it from the outside in.
For sure. I love that. I just love y'all's story, you know, talking about starting with educating, like your parents educated themselves on diabetes and what their child was going through, you know, as they were caring for you, and then started advocating for others. That's amazing. That's amazing. Anyone else? What can caregivers do to advocate for themselves? No pressure, because that was a perfect answer. It was so good. Okay, and so, you know, our last question, really to end on,
that in itself is so important. I was just saying that in itself is so important. Not only it's empowering to be able to go to the Hill and to tell people that you give them your real story. This is not just statistics. We know there's a lot of people, Americans, that are undiagnosed and they have diabetes. So it's important in our country, not only to learn about what we do about nutrition. And I applaud that. I love that dynamic duo. I mean, that's just, it's excellent. But everyone always wants to know, well, why did this happen? And maybe that's why, because we're supposed to have that mission to care for one another and educate and get it can be controlled, but we empower ourselves.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Connie. That was very powerful. I love that. I love that. So to end on an uplifting note, since we've been talking about caregivers and caring for our caregivers, we really want to end on a powerful note and really just uplift them. So can each one of you give one word to describe caregivers, whether that's yourself, you're from your experience, or the caregivers in your life? Just give us one word to describe caregivers. Connie, you first.
I will say resiliency.
Yep. Yes, resilient. Yes, I love that. Reva?
Selfless.
Selfless. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Serena, you've been on both sides as well, caregiving and giving care. So what's your word?
Breathe.
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 That inhale, exhale, your self-care.
Breathe.
That is
That's
a perfect one. Yep, that's a perfect one to end on, reminding everyone to breathe and take care of themselves. As you care for others, remembering to care for yourself. So I just want to say thank you all of the panelists. You guys were incredible just for joining me today and really contributing to the discussion of supporting caregivers. What an incredible discussion we had, and each one of you brought such a unique perspective. So thank you so much. And to our viewers, we hope that this morning has opened your eyes to the overall experience of caregivers, caring for those living with diabetes and thriving, right? They talked about that, still living your life. You can still thrive while you're living with diabetes. So we hope that you gained some valuable information, and please reach out to us for any additional support or for any of the resources mentioned on today's call. So we have a quick survey on YouTube and Facebook where you're watching, where we would like to get your feedback on the program as well as recommendations for future episodes. So please make MyDiabetesHQ Live better by filling out that survey. And lastly, mark your calendars. We will be broadcasting every Saturday, bright and early, 10 a.m. Central and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So our next episode will air next Saturday, March 6th. So thank you guys so much for being a part of the MyDiabetesHQ community, and see you next time.